Good day. This is Richard Wexler, and this is Caring in America, the podcast for caregivers and care recipients. And folks, the ones that have been with me for a while know my story. 20 years ago, married later, two small children, working in software. My wife and I have all four of our parents with us. We think they're doing great, and we were wrong. They're not doing very well at all. Phone calls started in the summer of '05. We wound up taking care of them for 14 years until the final parent passed at 96 in 2019. Steph Byral is with us today too, and she and I kind of want to talk about what's coming up. And that's the holidays. I mean, we're just a few weeks from Thanksgiving. We have Christmas after that. And I don't know, what are your thoughts around that stuff?
So I'm actually curious on if you have any advice for the adult children or maybe an adult grandchild. For those that are going home for the holidays, they might only see the older adults in their life once, two, maybe three times a year. Are there different things that they can look for to help them out and kind of assess where they're at on their aging journey?
No, I think that's an excellent question. And yeah, I mean, a lot of us just don't think about that. Let's say we've been out of the house for 20 years or 30 years as an adult child. And every year, grandma still has the holiday celebrations, whether they be Thanksgiving or Christmas. And I don't think we're going home looking for aspects of aging. But as we've talked about, with our population really aging, with over 100 million people in this country now over 50, and what's crazy to me, being 72, the oldest boomers are turning 80. I think we really have to kind of keep our minds open and take a look and see, is mom moving differently? Is dad moving differently? When's the last time you saw them? Was it last summer? Was it sometime during this past year for someone's birthday? Or has it been a full year or longer that you were with mom and dad, grandparents? So looking at them from a movement standpoint, looking at them from a cognition standpoint. I mean, I've talked about this and I've seen it where a father, maybe not even that old, will address a son and call him by his brother's name, or address a daughter and call her by by her sister's name. So are you seeing some things from a cognition standpoint? And then overall, their mood. I mean, what are they like? Are they in a great mood when you come home? Are you bringing grandchildren with you, grandchildren they haven't seen in a long time? Or do they seem kind of depressed? I mean, I hope that answers your question, Steph.
Yeah, so it sounds like really movement, cognition, and mood are kind of three overarching things to at when you're visiting.
I would can maybe you can address that more. Can you talk a little bit more about movement and maybe what someone should be looking for and signs?
Yeah, one thing that I would say that's pretty common in that I've seen in like retirement communities is, if you're at a higher fall risk, that could be shown early in, are they shuffling their feet? Are they tripping over things? Those are also some low-hanging fruit to help remove the fall risk. And we have a page on our website that actually talks about mitigating some of the fall risk, like removing rugs, adding grab bars, things like that. Um, but otherwise, other things for movement would be like a change in their gait. Are they walking differently than when you've seen them last, or what's normal for them? If you live somewhere where there's ice on the ground, we're coming into that season as well. So just being kind of aware of what changes are already happening or what could cause changes.
Wow, no, that's pretty good. And I mean, you would, and again, folks, it's probably not something you're thinking about. Maybe you are, but I mean, just simply, especially, you know, mom and dad, maybe they're 75 plus. Maybe you still have grandparents alive that are 85, 90 plus, and just watching the way they move. And as Steph was talking about, is there a real concern that they're going to potentially trip? They're going to potentially fall. And obviously, as we get older, we may be a little bit more frail than we used to be. And unfortunately, things break. So from a cognition standpoint, Steph, what should adult children, grandchildren be looking for there?
This one I would say is actually a little bit different than what I would first think, if that makes sense at all. I feel like when you think of cognition changes, you think of memory loss. And of course, that is kind of a giveaway that something might be going on if you're noticing memory loss. But there's different signs, especially in my caregiving journey. And I know we've talked about it a little bit in the past that my dad has early onset Alzheimer's. And one of the first signs that something was up was my mom would speak for him. So if somebody asked him a question, she would jump in and cover. And that wasn't normal for him. Usually he's kind of the life of the party and a social one. So that was actually one of the first signs I would say for my dad's situation specifically, um, repeating themselves or who's ever like starting the conversation, if they're repeating that, that could also be something with a processing thing or memory loss. If they're maybe not engaging in a conversation, but or not adding to a conversation, but just kind of changing your words and feeding it back to you. Those are other things that I've seen in the past that could lean towards like memory loss that you wouldn't necessarily maybe think is memory loss.
No, I think those are great tips. And folks, as I always say, please share this information, especially if you know other folks that are going home for the holidays. Could be going home for both Thanksgiving and Christmas, could be going home for one or the other. But I mean, Steph was just talking about from a cognition standpoint, and a lot of times we do think it's just a memory loss or not being able to remember certain things, dates, their children's names, things like that. But as she was saying, other things that you may notice and hear, obviously, the sooner families can start talking about some of the signs, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but some of the signs that they're seeing, obviously better for that individual and better for the family as well. From a mood perspective, Steph, what are your thoughts there?
That's a good one. I think that's another kind of tricky one, unless they're, if maybe they've had personality shifts or changes in that. If they're usually a really happy, upbeat person and all of a sudden they may be a little bit more down or depressed feeling, that is a very clear sign that something's probably going on. But there's some smaller signs to maybe look for too, like if they lost interest in a hobby or something that they've enjoyed before. Um, I feel like that's something that isn't as in your face, if that makes sense, for mood. Um, I'm trying to think of if there's any other like small changes to look for. Are there any that you can think of?
Well, I think even in addition to what we've talked about, I mean, sometimes if you really notice, there's been some pretty significant vision changes in an older loved one or hearing changes. dad's really having a difficult time from the last time you were home. And as I said, a lot of times as we get older, it's funny, I don't eat as much now as I used to eat when I was a younger individual. But is that just because you're full and don't eat anymore and don't want to eat anymore? Or is it malnutrition? I mean, are you getting the appropriate diet? So a lot of it is, you know, if you're old enough, folks, you remember Peter Falk and the great show that he had 30, 40 years ago. I mean, you want to be almost a detective. You want to understand that it's going to be, and maybe it won't, but it's probably going to be challenging for mom, dad, grandparents to admit that something's going on, that they're having trouble moving, or there are some cognition issues, or from a mood perspective. So we, as the adult children and the grandchildren as well, I'm talking even younger grandchildren will pick up on things with grandparents that they may not have seen before because, I mean, this is serious. And then what do we do? I'm going to ask Steph some thoughts on this. What do we do if it becomes noticeable that there are changes? What advice do you have, Steph?
First thing I would say is if there are some changes, see if they can get to a doctor somewhat soon, or if they have recently. There may be chronic issue going on. You talked about like food insecurity or malnutrition. UTIs are pretty common in people as they age, and that can throw off a whole bunch of different symptoms. So I feel like getting to a doctor, kind of getting a baseline of where are they at with their health, how are they doing is important.
Yeah. And which brings up what we talk about on our site, A Plan to Age. Remember, folks, it's with the number two. We talk about the family conversation that can be difficult. Even in this situation, you've seen something, you've heard something that sends off some alarm bells. And if there are siblings, yeah, you want to do what Steph said. You want to hopefully try to get them to a physician and get them seen. That can be challenging. And maybe you have to phrase this properly to mom, dad, grandparents. And as we talked about, you're probably going to want to talk to your siblings first if you have them and determine within that group of siblings, is there one? Are there four, five, or more? Who's the best person to be reaching out to mom or dad about this? The last thing you want to do is attack them because they'll feel that you're doing that and they'll probably clam up. So there is this process you want to go through quickly because you've seen that things are changing in talking to brothers and sisters, determining who's going to pick up the phone, because maybe you literally can't talk to them in person. And maybe there's other guests in the home, and this would cause quite a scene. But you don't want it to drag on. So someone needs to pick up the phone at some point after you agree who that's going to be. And as we talked about, ask for advice. Tell mom you need some help. She's probably not going to turn you down to start the conversation and then slowly build to where you want to get about your brother John noticed some changes when he was home for Thanksgiving. Your sister Mary noticed some changes when she was home for Christmas, whether that's in mom directly or with dad. Because one thing we've noticed, the senior care industry normally gets pretty busy in January and February after those adult children get back home. pick up the phone, talk to each other, and then one of them reaches out to mom or dad and or the grandparents. Any other further advice, Steph?
One other thing, maybe it would fit under mood or movement that I was thinking of is if you're noticing like pills or pill bottles laying around and it's more than usual or where they're not being taken, that's something also to look for. As well as if they have, and you kind of talked about this with malnutrition, but if they have like food in the fridge that's expiring and going bad, like those are two other things that might be worth looking into. Peek in the fridge, pretend you're grabbing milk or something, and just kind of take that like inventory while you're there for the holidays, while you're visiting them.
And again, I'm not telling everyone to go home and be that detective, but as parents and grandparents age, you really need to be. And as Steph was saying, you're using the restroom. Maybe you use mom and dad's bathroom. You notice quite a few pill bottles. You notice that they're almost empty, they're full. There's quite a few. I mean, you want to understand what they're taking and why they're taking. But again, that's a challenging conversation that needs to be done appropriately because the last thing you want mom or dad to think, as I said, is that you're attacking them. I know to help people, I believe we have a checklist on our site. Is that correct?
Yep, if you just go to our homepage, so a plan to the number two age.org, there will be a pop-up that will show holiday check-in. Click on that, and we have a PDF that you're able to download. And we also will have this podcast available everywhere, so please share it with others so whoever is going home for the holidays can be able to bring that checklist along with them.
Very cool. No, I mean, and I thank you, Steph, and this has been some great advice. And, folks, we want you to have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We want you to have a wonderful holiday. Started the new year, hard to believe it's going to be 2026. But again, you kind of want to be that amateur detective and just make sure that if you're starting to see change, that some appropriate conversations take place. And it's, you want to do it now compared to later and hopefully get in front of some issues. So, Steph, I thank you, and folks, until we talk again, have yourself a great day.